Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ajwa. Nice to see you today. And I'm here with my good friend Jasdeep, Dr. Sandhu.
Hi, nice to meet you
Thank
again.
you. Yes, and thank you so much for coming and
Yeah.
speaking with me today.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to you more about integrative psychiatry. So that is something that a lot of us regular psychiatrists, we're not typically trained in it. And when you have gotten a lot more experience and a lot more training in it, and I think it's a very important way that we can treat our patients by having a more whole and integrative approach. So I'd like you to share some of the wonderful work and knowledge that you have.
Yeah, I would love to. So I was trained very traditionally, right? We went to the same residency, we learned a lot, and that's important, right? And my sort of philosophy with how I work with patients, and some of that has come through research and some of that has come through just clinical experience, is you really have to treat the whole person. And I think sometimes in Western medicine that gets a bit lost. We're taught to kind of like look at the heart, look at the brain, look at this, and humans don't work that way. We're like full whole beings, right?
Yeah.
And more than that, we're like a product of our environment. And so you really have to blend all those things together. And so integrative psychiatry, and everybody has a different definition, but for me, integrative psychiatry is how do you work with somebody's mind, body, spirit, their environment, their internal world, and help them come to a better state of health, like integrating all those things together. So that's sort of the way I work with patients. And obviously there's so many avenues you can go through from that. And another thing I like to sort of start with people is I'm going to meet you where you are, right? So if somebody's like really interested in nutrition, like that's where we will start. If someone's really like, I really want to work on my trauma, well, that's where we have to start. Otherwise, nothing else is going to flow.
Yeah.
So all those things are important. And so with integrative psychiatry, we're just trying to address all those things. And often they interplay, right? Like if you're working on sleep, like your gut's going to feel better. If you're working on your gut, you're going to have more mental clarity, right? If you're doing meditation and feeling safer in your body, making decisions for yourself that are true for yourself is a lot easier. So they all kind of play together.
Yeah, very true, very important. Yeah. And so what are some of the principles or philosophies that govern and drive your approach to how you work with patients?
So I will say my big three sort of concrete things are nutrition, sleep, and movement. And so, because if those things are lacking or just not optimal, it's very hard to treat anything else, right? So, and this is not even just like an integrative psychiatry thing, but like everybody knows, right? If you don't sleep well, like you can't just say I have major depressive disorder. If you're not sleeping, that's what the issue is, right? And so you have to sort of go through that whole process of like, well, what's getting in the way of your sleeping, and how can we have more restorative sleep, or what habits are you doing that are interfering? So sleep is a big one. Nutrition, because we're more gut than we are brain sometimes, and so just understanding that whole perspective and like understanding your microbiome and understanding what like aggravates your gut and what doesn't, and assimilation of nutrients and all those things. Because again, like if you're eating very poorly, like your brain's just not going to work, right? So again, we can't say you have anxiety, depression, etc. if you're not fueling your body well. And then movement, which I don't like to use the word exercise so much because I think it has a lot of a negative connotation, but like we were built to move. Like there's a reason so much of our brain is devoted to like coordination and movement. Like that's how we developed, right? And so if you're not moving your body, your brain's not going to work. And so that can be anything. That can be exercise, right? That can be running, that can be yoga, that can be walking. And then movement also entails so much from like a nervous system release standpoint that it becomes very important, right? So like, are you dancing? Are you shaking? Are you like going for a walk when things get stressful? So like movement like has to happen. So those are like the big three things I approach with people. And then there's nuances to all that. And that's sort of where more the internal work comes in, right? Like doing inner child work or working on meditation and mindfulness, or understanding like even intergenerational trauma and how that's affecting you.
And I think that, like you said, the gut, the movement, and the sleep is very important. I work in the emergency room, and so my interactions with people are pretty limited. I might see you once. I hope I only see you once in the emergency room, right? Because if you're there several times, that's not optimal. But things that I always ask about are definitely how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Those are very key things. And how you have different changes in your sleep can tell me what diagnosis you might have, or what your appetite is, if it's really high or if it's very low. That can give me a little bit more clues into what's going on with you. Movement is actually something that we don't talk about so much, and we're not really I guess it's not a focus in our training to assess how people are moving, and we're not really prescribing movement. But I think it is very, very important because when you are just staying in place, you feel more listless. It's harder to just garner energy. So just getting up, moving is very, very important.
Yeah. And in other countries, like in the UK, for example, like they actually have like prescriptions for exercise. And if your like GP over there writes you a prescription, like they're like, you go to this gym and you do that. Like it's very prescriptive, which is how it needs to be. And so like that, and that's the way that I think people start conceptualizing it as like, oh, this is the treatment. It's not just like an afterthought. And so I always like lead with that. And obviously like I prescribe medicines and supplements and medications, etc. But like, it's only, I tell people that's like sometimes depending on what the issue is, like 10 to 25%. It's never more than that, like honestly. And so you have to have these other pieces like in the whole like pie of your treatment. So yeah, I definitely use exercise as a prescription, but again, you have to be really granular with people. Like aerobic exercise is going to have a different benefit than strength training, is going to have a different benefit than like yoga and stretching, right? And also like the timing of when you do these things is important. So I try to be pretty personalized with people when I'm telling them like what might be useful for them. And then at the end of the day, right, you try something. If you don't like it, you try something else, right? There's not one way to do it. So.
Yeah. Again, I think traditionally we've always thought about exercise in the context of a physical health benefit in terms of if you have heart disease or diabetes or something like that. But again, it does really play into your mental health.
Yeah, it's helping you create those neurotransmitters, right? Your dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and all of that in a balance, right? Versus just like shocking your system with all of it. Like your body knows how to produce it in like a more balanced way.
Yeah. And I think, I find that if I'm not moving a lot, if I'm not exercising, I feel a little bit off. I feel a little bit grumpy or whatever. People have noticed that about me as well. So,
same.
They're like, are you still doing what you normally do? And I think it's just something that we all have to remember to definitely incorporate along with so many of the other things that we typically think of, like sleep and rest, medicines and things like that.
And I think the time thing is a big thing. And people are like, well, I don't have time to do it. And it's like, well, you don't have time to not do it, because everything else in your life is going to feel a lot less efficient if you're not giving yourself time to move, even if it's like 10 minutes, right? Or take like movement breaks. Like if you're sitting, like every hour you should be trying to get up. And so I teach that quite a bit too. And then people are surprised because they think like, well, if I can't go to the gym, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, that's like a mindset shift you need. It's like any movement your body will appreciate, but you have to frame it that way. So if that's like getting up and you're doing like 10 squats in between meetings, like great, like your body, your brain will benefit from that.
Yeah. And then you also talked about some other things like you're looking at your emotions, your inner child. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big topic, but also as I was working with people and giving them all this information about like nutrition and sleep and all these things, people are like, I might know that, but like I can't do the thing, right? And so that's also where sort of our traditional training comes into play, is like there's so many like internal forces, right, and defenses and ways we've learned to do things or not do things that have served us. And so a lot of the psychological piece is like, okay, what are you doing that's like no longer serving you, and it's getting in the way of this like knowledge you have, right? Like everybody knows they should eat well, but what does that actually mean, right? And so somebody might have all sorts of associations, right? I mean, I've heard all sorts of things like they're not going to eat well because one, they were never taught to, or it was never modeled to them, or they like felt like they didn't deserve to have certain types of food, or it was like very like, this is good food, this is bad food. And so it's like you have to kind of dig into people's history and understand like what are the associations, because it's not so simple as like, oh, this is good, I'll just do this. And it's like that, it's never that simple. So I go into that a lot with people, and a lot of it is kind of, at least my style with some people, it's just a lot of like Socratic questioning. I'm just like, okay, well, why that? Well, why that? Like, what does that mean? Because people don't do that, right? And that's part of that internal work, is like, well, where did that belief come from? Where did that story come from? Who told you that?
And helping people kind of discover things themselves through that questioning. Just that question is enough to elicit the answer from you.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's but so much we can tell people about themselves because we haven't lived in their bodies, their lives.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's another important piece. I'm like, I don't know the answer, so I'm just going to keep asking you, right? And of course, you have to do it gently, and you have to build that trust with people. And you'll meet resistance, right? And sometimes when you meet that resistance, you're like, okay, that like you need to go home now and like work with that resistance, because clearly like we've hit some sort of wall, or there's some part of you that's like, ooh, like that's, I don't feel safe talking about that. And that's fine. You don't ever push that, but that's probably like related to other reasons you're not doing some of these good things for yourself. So yeah, it's a very interesting way to work with people. And I tell people like you have all the answers, right? My job is just to help like bring it out of you. And so some of that is again like prepping your body and mind and spirit to like go inwards, right? And sometimes it's like you need a safe container to explore it, or you were never given permission to explore it. So it's like, can I help people feel more empowered to just be like, like go inside, you'll find the answer. And then all the rest of the stuff is easy. Then you're like, duh, of course I'm going to do this. Like, of course I'm going to, go to the farmer's market, or I'm going to work out every morning, then it becomes so easy because it feels good and you're not blocking yourself from that feeling good anymore.
And when people go home, like, how are you advising them to maybe be more introspective? Are you encouraging journaling? Are you encouraging them to just sit and think? Is it more so talking with someone else that they feel more comfortable with?
I mean, I encourage a lot of like solo work. And so sometimes that's journaling, if that's like somebody feels comfortable, like just writing and just getting that dialogue out. Sometimes it's like more sitting meditation, right? And just like sitting, going quiet, going inwards, and just like watching what's coming up. And then like having prompts, right? Like if there's a question you've been really stuck on, right? Like why am I sabotaging this thing, right? Like, or why do I keep picking this type of person? It's like, if you sit quietly long enough, like an answer will come up. And that's what's like exciting is what I tell people. Like, it could be anything. Like, I don't know, like I don't want to plant seeds and ideas. It could be anything. And people come up with the wildest stuff, right? Or they'll just find a lot of peace. And then they're like, oh, I guess I didn't need to be so like worried about that thing. Like I'm sitting with myself and all I'm getting from my system is like, it's fine, just like make a decision, whatever. And so like that's such a special practice to have, and like only you can give yourself that. So I'm always encouraging people, and we'll do a little bit in session, right? Like I might sit with somebody for a few minutes and get them to like breathe, drop in, ask the question, and see what comes up. And then I'm like, great, we did that in like 6 minutes. Now, if you do that at home for like 15, 20 minutes, you'll find all sorts, like a whole world of like internal resources. And yeah, it may happen the first time, it may happen the 10th time, but the point is like you stick with it.
In terms of breath work, you mentioned doing those type of exercises with your patients. What are some of the ways that you instruct them to do that? What are the exercises?
So breath work is super powerful. Like your breath is one of the most like potent forces known to man. And if you change the way you breathe, you change the way you think. If you change the way you breathe, you change the way you feel, right? And so there's a lot of sort of bottom up control we have that we forget about. And so a lot of times it's just even reminding people that, like, drop out of your head, right? Like drop into your body or connect to your breath. And for some people, like, it's scary to do that. So again, you have to kind of go at the pace that feels comfortable for you. But I always just get people first to even become aware of their breath. And sometimes just becoming aware of it, you're like, oh, I'm like not breathing very well, or like I'm only breathing in my chest or something, right? And so first, like, is awareness of breath. And then there's very simple things. So one I like to teach a lot is anytime that your inhale to exhale ratio is a 1-to-2 ratio, meaning your exhales are twice as long as your inhales, that like automatically puts you into parasympathetic. And we want to be in parasympathetic. That's like our rest, digest, tend, befriend, all of that, right? That's our calm, like things are going well, we can think clearly, etc. Versus when you're not breathing that way, or you're breathing a bit rapidly, you get in this fight or flight type of feeling. And again, it may not be conscious. Most people aren't, which is why when they start doing breath work, they're like, oh, this is what it feels like to be calm. And it's like, yes. And the magic is you can like access that anytime. And so I teach a lot of that. Okay, so like start, just breathe in for 2, out for 4, in for 2, out for 4. Okay, then you do 3 to 6, and then you do 4 to 8. And within like 2 minutes, you've totally changed your physiology, and you can like look at the world new again. So that's a really powerful one. Some other ones, so box breathing is really good, where you're just like breathing, holding, and that's an equal part breath. And again, that slows your system down enough, but it's also nice because it kind of still keeps you focused, versus like the 1-to-2 ratio like really slows you down. But box breathing is often just like a nice reset, especially if you're kind of feeling like scattered throughout the day, or you're like jumping from meeting to meeting. Like a box breath will kind of like get you grounded and centered.
So
you're breathing in, you're holding, you're breathing out, you're holding. So you just imagine the sides of a box,
So I'm visualizing the box while
Mm-hmm.
I'm breathing
Mm-hmm.
in, holding, breathing in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or you can do
So,
it to a count of 4. So you can breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. So you can, yeah. So you do even a few rounds of that, and it just drops you in, but you're still like focused, right? So that's a nice one to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all sorts of things. So a lot of the breath work is based on like yoga philosophy, so pranayama. And so there's other ones I teach, alternate nostril breathing, which is kind of fun because it kind of gets like both sides of your brain kind of evened out. So that one's a good one. There's like more forceful breathing, like shining skull is one of the ones, and that kind of gets you like heated up internally. But again, once you're done with these breathwork practices, like you have so much clarity because like your breath just like moves energy, you know. So there's like breathwork is a whole world of things to try.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for elucidating that and helping us know a little bit more about what we can do and practices that we can try to implement ourselves. I do want to take a step back to the nutrition because I think that is something that people focus on a lot of times because we're worried about maybe nutrition with regards to, most commonly it tends to be either I think your weight for people, or if you have diabetes, is related to your blood sugar. That's where it really comes in. So I think it feels a little bit more approachable and something also that people tend to focus on in their day-to-day lives, whether it's good how much focus is put on it in whatever type of context. But I mean, in terms of your mental health, are there kind of like 5 foods or even not even foods, but maybe supplements or things like that you think can enhance your mental health?
Yeah, I mean, very broadly speaking, I mean, just to like back up. So like going back to this idea that like we're not these like separate things, right? Like food's going to help everything. And so when patients like are telling me like, oh, I want to lose weight or I'm like, the things I'm going to ask you to do, like you might lose weight, you probably will, but that's not the focus. The focus is like good metabolism and like absorbing nutrients and like getting the right foods into your body so you have the right building blocks so that your brain works better. But if again your brains aren't isolated from everything else, if your gut's working better, your metabolism's working better, your like blood sugar's stable, like all of that benefits your brain, right? And even like diabetes, cardiovascular health, I mean those affect your brain, right? And like insulin resistance is a big problem like in this country and many countries, and like that is not good for your brain. Like sugar is toxic essentially at the end of the day. And so if it's affecting your blood vessels, because in diabetes, like how is your brain working? You have to get blood to your, like, so all of this is related, right? Like your vasculature doesn't stop up here. So if it's affecting your blood, like blood pressure, or affecting the quality of your blood vessels, like high blood sugar is going to affect everything, right? So controlling blood sugar is like one of the big things I talk with patients about. And it's not just bringing sugar down, it's like keeping your blood sugar stable, because often people are having like spikes in anxiety because they're either really low blood sugar or they are like eating something really processed and sugary and it spikes and it goes back down. And to your body, that just feels like anxiety. And so I have a lot of people who are like just having coffee in the morning or like coffee and a bagel or something. And I'm like, you just took caffeine and sugar. Your body's going to like run with it for like a few like minutes, maybe 30 minutes, then you're going to crash. And then the story in your mind is going to tell you something about what that means. And you're going to be like, I'm so anxious. And it's like, no, you messed up your blood sugar. Versus whatever's happening in your life, right? If you approach it and you've had like protein and fiber and fat and maybe a little bit of carbs, but like then your body at least is at a set point, right? So that anything else that's happening, it's from the outside. So a lot of it is just like getting people to pay attention. Like when you eat this, how do you feel, right? And don't attach a story to it. Just be very honest about like, I ate this and then this is how I felt after. So like regulating blood sugar is important. And like a very sort of maybe overly simplistic is like, you need fiber, you need fat, you need protein at any time you eat anything, right? Because if you're just having like glucose, sugar in your system, right? That's not super helpful, and it causes this up and down. So blood sugar stabilization is a big thing. And then just as much as you can, not eating processed foods, right? And not eating packaged things. And not all processed food is bad. I think people forget, like, olive oil is processed, like they have to
Yeah.
press the olive. I mean, that's
Yeah.
technically a processed food, but we're talking about things that are like, there's more ingredients than you can pronounce, right? Or it's like a food product, right?
Yeah.
Like eat a potato, don't eat a potato chip type of thing, right? Or if you're gonna, like, you know, it's better to make the cookies than buy the cookies, that type of stuff. But like a lot of it goes down to ingredients, and again, part of that is the processing is a quick sugar into your system, and that's not great for us.
Yeah.
Versus like if you have to eat an apple, right? Versus like you're having apple juice, like that's so much sugar to hit your system really quickly. So I teach a lot about that. Just like have the whole food as much as you can. And I don't really talk to people about portions or like restricting anything. Like I don't think that's helpful, because the thing is, if you're eating whole foods, you're naturally gonna like limit yourself. There's only like so much steak and greens and broccoli and all of, you know, like
so many apples you can eat.
Exactly.
You know, after 2 or 3, you're kind of full.
Yeah, exactly. And especially again, if you're sticking with this fiber, fat, protein, right? Yeah, you could eat like a whole bag of grapes and you might still have like a huge blood sugar spike, but that's not what we're talking about, right? But like if you're having, like a steak, a fish, veggies, like eat as much as you want, just listen to your body. And again, that's like we're tying in these like mindfulness pieces and meditation pieces and like checking in with yourself, like you'll know, you know, and then it's not going to be a weight thing. So those are like, I would say the big things I kind of focus on with people with food. And then obviously like I can get really specific with people and do elimination diets, just because there's things that people are like commonly triggered by, like gluten is a big one in this country. Dairy, most people can't tolerate. And then there's like nuanced things, right? Nightshades or soy or corn. And so sometimes again, you want to work with somebody who like knows how to guide you, but like cutting those out, because if they're irritating your system, you're fighting a losing battle, right? Even if it's something healthy, if you're eating it and every single time you eat it, your gut is reacting, you're causing inflammation in your system. And again, you're going to be like, oh, I just must be an anxious person. It's like, or you just couldn't tolerate gluten. Like,
yeah. I mean, I will say that a couple of years ago, I really revamped how I started to eat and trying to eat a little bit less gluten. I'm not allergic to it by any means. I love cupcakes, my favorite food. But I don't eat that much, especially not anymore. But I will say that just trying to cut down on the processed carbohydrates I was eating that were super refined and simple, not eating as many crackers. If I'm going to eat carbohydrates, I'm eating rice or other whole grains. I definitely noticed there was a difference in between difference with my clarity of thought during the daytime, wasn't feeling as sluggish at different times. And so when I start to eat more of those, usually when I'm traveling and you need a quick snack, I definitely noticed it. You know, you have less energy, and then, you know, you when you have less energy, then it starts to really affect, you know, how you're thinking, feeling a little bit down and things like that. So I do think, like you said, certain food groups, if you're eating more or less of them, definitely affect your mental health. Yeah.
And it's also listening to your body. Like, again, when I have people try to eliminate different things, I mean, every once in a while, I won't say it's as common as some people wish it was, but yeah, maybe 10, 15% of the time, they're like, I cut out gluten and nothing happened. I'm like, great, but at least we know, like now we tried and we know, but the majority of the time it's like, that was not helpful. So that, you know, it's good we tried to cut it out. And then it becomes like, moderation, you're traveling, whatever, you know. And then the other big thing with nutrition is like you have to think of it like you're feeding your bacteria, which is much more important, I think, than people give it credit for. Like where there's more bacteria than we have cells in our body, right? Like they're like running the show. And so if your bacteria are not happy, like you are not happy. And so that's another reason, right? Like we did not evolve with these bacteria eating crackers, right? We evolved with them having meat, vegetables, toxins even, but like the bacteria are the things that are protecting you, right? Or they're helping us like synthesize vitamins that we can't synthesize on our own, like certain B vitamins or vitamin K. Like that's your bacteria doing that. You're not like necessarily eating and absorbing that. And so there's just like lots of things like that you have to think about. If your bacteria are not happy because of toxins, like immune reactions to your food, which is happening in your gut, too much sugar, like nothing is going to work. Like it starts with your gut. So it's not even like you could be eating the right thing, but like if there's toxins in your system, your gut bacteria are messed up and you may not even assimilate those nutrients. Yeah. So it's again a reason to like work with somebody and not just kind of, you know, listen to your body, trial and error. But like if you're feeling like stuck about something and you're like, oh, I eat healthy, well, there could be these other things going on, right? Your microbiome could be disrupted. There could be like psychological things your body is resisting, so you have to kind of think about it from that perspective too.
If somebody came to you and they were saying, I'm particularly struggling with depression, are there certain things that you necessarily focus on in terms of in their diet, things to maybe eliminate or to incorporate per se?
Yeah, so plant-based, definitely. Like there's many studies that show like the number of plants, like the different amount of plants you eat, like increases your microbial diversity. And when you increase your microbial diversity, you have less chronic disease, including depression, but including all sorts of chronic diseases, right? Yeah. And so that's like a very simplistic way again of like just increase the number of plants, because what you're doing then is you're increasing like phytonutrients and antioxidants and all these things that your body needs to basically detox all the time from like living in our environment. But also like fiber, we need a lot of fiber and people don't get enough fiber. So eating more plants, I'm not saying be vegetarian. I don't think that's healthy for most people, but like I tell people 6 to 9 servings a day, and most people are like shocked, but like that's actually the amount or plus you should be eating. And you can't like jump into that all at once or you'll have like a lot of indigestion. So I tell people like if you're having 2 a day, like do 3 a day for a week and then 4 a day for a week. And again, like, yeah, technically potatoes a vegetable, but it's really a starch. I'm saying like that means like you're having half a cup of broccoli, spinach in your smoothie, like sliced up apples and peanut butter, whatever, right? Or like getting different types of vegetables is also important. You don't want to get stuck in this like monotonous routine, because the point is to increase the diversity in your gut. So that's like a big thing I tell people to do. And they do start feeling better, and then they start noticing when they don't, right? Because like, for example, when they travel, and I'm like, well, what was different? And they're like, I didn't get to eat as many plants. And I'm like, that's all it is.
It's so hard to eat like plants and healthier things when you're traveling. I don't know why, but they're not just as available as snacks. You have some nuts. What if you have a nut allergy like myself? So you don't have that readily available to you. Or
it takes planning. You have to like bring your own food and snacks. And I'm definitely that person at the airport who's like eating my cucumbers and like apple slices. And I'm just like, whatever.
And you think about it. Or it can honestly, sadly, be a little bit more expensive than the little bag of chips.
It is.
So, I mean, on the whole, you can definitely find cheaper places to buy your groceries from your day-to-day life, but I find sometimes when you're traveling it's a little bit harder. But like you said, with some planning, being very deliberate, thinking in advance about what can you bring, whether it is dried fruit or dried vegetables,
or even like some of the greens powders and stuff. Like people are always like, oh, can I just like use athletic greens or whatever? And I'm like, I mean, it's not a substitute, but like if you're traveling, it probably is better than nothing to get some nutrients in. But again, you're missing like the fiber and the live organisms and the plants, but like, sure. If that's the easiest way for you to at least get something in your system while you're traveling, sure. But that's not going to, last for days and days if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you really want to share that you think is important for people to kind of think about in terms of the integrative medicine approach to mental health?
Yeah. So my big thing with patients, I mean, with anybody really, it's including myself, is like you have the answers. So my thing is like you're your own medicine, right? And so my job is to help you like find those answers. And so to really empower yourself, and don't always look for the answers outside of yourself, right? Like you're listening to us talking, but this is to plant seeds so that you actually go inwards and like look at like, oh, how does my body feel when I eat this? What story am I telling myself about how I do XYZ, right? Because that's what the medicine is. Like then you'll figure out, oh, this is what I need to hear. This is what I need to eat. This is how I need to move my body. So like you are your own medicine. Don't let anybody take that away from you. And that's how you stay healthy and like explore and like get to live the type of life you want to live.
Yeah. That is great. Thank you so much for joining
welcome.
Me today and sharing all this amazing knowledge with myself and with everyone else. So I will say, if you'd like to hear more about integrative psychiatry, are there any resources that you like to listen to, any other podcasts? And I will also definitely say to follow you on social media. So let us know where we can find you and more information.
Yeah, so I don't really have a very active social media right now, but whenever I do, I will let you know. And I'm mostly, like I work in private practice, right? So I'm mostly referrals based and things like that. But I'm around, and you know where I am, so people can contact me. I would say like podcasts and things I listen to, and other doctors I listen to. So Mind Body Green is a really good resource, and they have a great podcast that I've listened to for a while. Dr. Will Cole, he has a wellness podcast that's great, and he's a functional medicine doctor, but he does a lot of stuff with mental health and the gut. Just a few other doctors, I don't know, just different people, and there's people in Austin, there's people in New York, and those are mostly the people that I work with and know. So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
well, thank you so much.
And then people like yourself, obviously, like you're out here putting out good messages, and so
well, thank you. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you like this content, and I look forward to seeing you another time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.